Hey everybody, welcome to Fantasy R&R. This is your host Ryan.
And I'm Rob.
And this is week 11 of Fantasy Football 2022. Rest in peace.
This is Fantasy with Rob and Ryan, Fantasy R&R.
Alright, we are coming off a multitude of injuries. We've seen Khalil Herbert go on the IR, Romeo Doubs go on the IR, Ertz going on IR, Goedert, Cooper Kupp probably out for the season, and Juju Smith-Schuster getting Vontae's perfect by our own Jacksonville Cisco. Who is benefiting from these injuries is the real question. I mean, from the fantasy landscape perspective, Rob, I'd have to imagine Khalil Herbert off to a pretty good start. David Montgomery obviously is back into that comfortable, I can start him as an RB1 conversation. I mean, do you feel comfortable now with the way Justin Fields has been playing, having David Montgomery as an RB1? Do you think you would try to maybe even trade for him midway through the season? What are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I don't think that'd be a bad go at all, especially if you happen to have Justin Fields, because he more or less has been the RB1 for Chicago the last couple games. So he looks stellar. Very similar to that of, as we've talked before, Lamar and now Jalen Hurts. They've built this team around him. The game plan is built for him, and he essentially himself is an RB1. So yeah, I say if you have Fields or you're very weak right now, Herbert's going to be down, they said, for a while. And I say go get David Montgomery. And when it comes to those tight ends being injured, I mean, God bless. I have Goedert in one league, and I'm picking up Morneau or whatever, that Raiders backup to Darren Waller, who's been an absolute bust this year. I mean, it's slim pickings, and Joku you can wait on, but we've done that game one too many times, right?
And that's really the problem right now is we're midway through the season, so it's really hard to understand whether or not some of these guys are going to be worth holding on to in a redraft league or if they're going to be shut down for the rest of the season. You just have to watch the news closely. But Montgomery, who the last time he put up a 10-point-plus game was Week 7 at New England with 62 yards on the ground and a TD. He's been putting up 7 and 4.9 and 4.9.
Right.
And now you're trying to get that 20-point game out of him. I don't know if it happens with the way Justin Fields is running the offense right now, but you'd have to think that he has a little bit of an uptick in production with Herbert gone. Allen Lazard and Christian Watson, who we all knew was good, but just wasn't really involved in the Packers passing game, maybe because of the injury coming into the season. Romeo Doubs being out for the rest of the year or till week 17, 18, I'd have to assume that Allen Lazard and Christian Watson now start to get back to that 10-point every game performance. I don't know. Did you think this was a fluke like everyone else did? I didn't think it was a fluke. I think it's just the first time Rodgers has trusted Watson enough to become something.
Yeah, no, I don't at all. We've been talking all year that, what the heck's going on with Rodgers if it's not on the podcast. We've been saying that on the phone, and we're talking about the Packers ultimately being so bad, losing to the Lions. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. And look what they do. They go and play Dallas and win, and they look like the Packers of old. Okay, there we go. Are they back on track? We'll see. My biggest scare is owning shares of the Packers receivers and or Robert Tonyan at this point, and pretty much just spraying and praying, just hoping all right, I'm going to throw these guys in a flex or a wide receiver position and hope that they score. And I'm worried that each week it's going to be somebody different. But I mean, it's better than what they were doing just even a couple weeks ago with the Lions. I mean,
yeah, and right now I feel like the only one you can trust is Aaron Jones, and even he's been, as the years go on, since 2017 when he was a rookie, he's starting to kind of go up and down, and that happens with your running backs, but I still think he's the only trustable guy on that team at the moment. With Ertz being out on Arizona, this is one of those things where it's you don't really go for the handcuff or the backup. People are Trey McBride's going to get some reps. Steven Anderson saw some reps.
Right.
Why bother? Like you said, Njoku's on the waivers. I just had to drop Ingram in a league out of necessity because I already have Freiermuth. And, you're going to see some of these guys on the waiver wire who are totally worth putting your, trust in over these backups. So Foster Moreau, I have to assume, is on a lot of waiver wires right now, even with Darren Waller out the last few weeks. So, I mean, I would just look for guys like that. Same thing with Goedert being out. I mean, you're really going to go out there and roster Jack Stoll on the Eagles. I would have to assume that now, this next game, as long as Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown get healthy, Quez Watkins, those are Hurts is going to be going to those guys, not Jack fucking Stoll. I will say, with Cooper Kupp, rest in peace, I can't believe that shit, being out for the rest of the year, Allen Robinson does have the chance to finally become that Allen Robinson again. He will be the best. I mean, I don't know how you feel. I think he's going to be the best receiver on that field, regardless of Higbee being involved. But Matthew Stafford's back this week, and I've noticed Allen Robinson was dropped in a ton of leagues. I think I picked him up in 3 leagues this week. And I didn't really understand why nobody else wavered him, because I forgot to put in some waiver claims. I looked the next day, and I'm like, Allen Robinson's on the waivers? This is like the perfect storm. I mean, I don't know if people just think that Wolford's going to be back again, but Stafford's playing, and Kupp's out indefinitely. Allen Robinson is going to be a great DFS play this week. He's probably going to be a little bit more expensive than the last few weeks, but not as expensive as some of the premier receivers in the game, like Diggs and guys like that. I don't know. It's really, really irritating to watch that team. That Kyron Williams, the few snaps he took, they looked good, but they waited until the end of the game to do it. And I have to just ask this question, even though the running back situation is not injury related. Akers, Henderson, Kyron, you gotta marry one, fuck one, kill one, go for it.
Fuck them all. I don't want to have anything to do with any of those guys, man. Like, we just on the heels of what I was just talking about, like, situations I don't want to be a part of. And Cam Akers will rot on this bench until like the end of the season, and if he doesn't do anything, he's probably one of the 2 guys I cut in our dynasty league, because this is the Trey Sermon thing all over again. It just fell out of good graces, blah blah blah, whatever, man. This is the NFL. This thing's a circus. Like, you never know. You never know with these guys. The Elijah Moores we've talked about, in the past. And
yeah, I like to stay away from that stuff as
one
much
guy
as
I was
possible.
definitely way off of.
I would really love to see things kind of go more towards the Patriots now, where it seems to be like more like 2 running backs are switching between. The Commanders doing the same thing with Gibson and Robinson instead of fucking 3. That's why I'm saying Gus Edwards and Latavius Murray.
Me too.
And Kenyon Drake. These guys are all being dropped to the waivers because you never know which one's going to go off. I mean, even the Dolphins are doing the same thing. Mostert and Wilson are both putting up points. It's really weird. And one team that's not really doing that, the fucking Jaguars. They need to get a second running back involved to preserve Etienne. But it doesn't just preserve Etienne. Guys, one of the things you have to realize is you can actually lose fantasy production from an every down back, because they're going to get, these are humans, they're going to get tired at some point, and they're going to need to refresh a little bit so that they can break off those, home run plays. And I think that it's time for the Jaguars to do that before we see Etienne be the next one on the IR. Speaking of injuries affecting leagues, don't be that commissioner. I'm in a Yahoo league this year where this commissioner is a useless donut. There are teams playing Carson Wentz. We get 3 ads a week, but there's only 5 bench spots, and that was after I yelled his ear off to increase it from 4. Guys that don't have any of their defensive players, because we have 2 defensive players on rosters in that league, and they can't add anybody because there's only 3 ads, and they got to replace every dead player on their starting roster, and this guy's not doing anything about it. So I'm watching teams that are in the middle of the pack rise up through the rankings because they're getting free wins against people who aren't playing anybody. I mean, the guy got a free win against the dude who had Carson Wentz in his starting spot. There's money on the line in this league. It's absolutely ridiculous. One of the most ridiculous things I saw in this league was this guy's field goal scoring system. So what happens is, if you get a field goal from 20 to 30 yards, you only get 2 points. If you get an XP, though, that's a 32-yard XP. You get 1 point. So you just kicked a further kick, and you're going to get less than the 2 points, which is less than an actual field goal's worth. 30 yards is the max for the first one. You get 2 points. 31 yards, you get 3. 32-yard XP, you get 1. I don't know what fucking sense that makes, but, I don't know how you can be in a league like that and not shut it down at some point during the season. For me personally, if someone's doing that, I don't care if they're in last place. I'm going to give them a warning, and they can set their lineup the next week. And then if they don't do it again, I will take control of their team and just set the best players possible, and then start looking for someone else to replace it. I mean, look at me right now. I mean, after this last loss with Cooper Kupp going down and Jonathan Taylor's now off my team because I traded for him, my season's over, and I'm going to put Jalen Hurts in my starting spot. I have Najee Harris in there. I have Brian Robinson in there. And I'm going to play Stephanie as hard as I could possibly fucking play her this week because she's in the running for the championship. Why would I give her a free win? That's not fair to anybody who put in their money. And I just don't agree with that kind of stuff. I mean, it seems like you have a rather easy time in some of your leagues. What's the most egregious thing you've seen?
It's funny that you bring that up. Tom Brady was just dropped.
Yeah, that's inexcusable.
For Jacoby Brissett.
Oh my
For
God.
Jacoby Brissett. I thought I screenshotted that for you. I laughed my shaft off. That's going to be the image for this podcast, by the way. I think that the still image needs to be.
That's
Tom
great. Yeah,
Brady was
send that
dropped
to me for sure.
Jacoby
That's ridiculous.
Brissett. Comedic. Yeah. Oh, dude, I was just like, what? I mean, not even I don't know. I mean, I can think back on this NFL.com league. I'm 9-1.
Mm-hmm.
I've scored probably the third or fourth highest points, but that is on the shoulders of 2 weeks where I played Kamara when he was inactive and I accidentally started him. I still won those weeks. But what was egregious to me was in this league, was something that we've already talked about in this podcast. Josh Allen being drafted, I got him in the 3rd round, but Eckler fell to me with the 7th pick, and then I wrapped around and I got Kamara. And then after that, it was Josh Allen, but it was Kyle Pitts drafted before Josh Allen, and we were on the phone, and me and you just were cracking up, I'm talking about egregious silliness.
Yeah, those are things
silliness.
like you can't
That's
be charging
crazy.
money.
That's a
in those
terrible
kind of
pick.
leagues.
No, you can't. And essentially have like a beater team that just everybody's beating up on, and because they're not paying attention. That's not cool, especially now. Playoffs are in sight.
Yeah, and that's exactly why in ESPN I give people the option to buy in. I don't know if anyone else does this. This is a great tip for commissioners out there. Just set a deadline for people to wager on their team. And what you can do is if a team that didn't wager happens to make the championship out of pure luck because, they thought their team was bad, so they didn't wager, they don't win anything. And all the rest of the money can either get returned or, like we're going to do this season, we're going to roll it into next year. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. A lot of the teams in the front running are teams that paid. But, I mean, that's a great way to handle it so that if there is a really bad team in the league that maybe the guy doesn't know about as much about football or he doesn't pay attention as much as everyone else does, he doesn't have to have his money on the line. And everyone can play him at some point during the season in a 10-team, no-division format. Colt McCoy replacing Murray. That's next on our list here. You are rolling with Fields. Again, last week it was out of necessity. Now, I imagine even if Murray was back, it would be out of principle or logic. I do the same thing after seeing 4 performances in a row from Fields. But you're telling me you don't even know whether Murray's really injured or there's just that attitude in the locker room that's going to keep him behind the scenes while Colt McCoy takes over the team for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Colt McCoy, the old Texas quarterback, looks like he's found himself a nice little team. And behind him is Trace McSorley, my guy from Penn State, as a 3rd stringer. But yeah, Kyler Murray, it's being reported that he injured his hamstring week 8, then he tweaked it week 9, still played, and then ultimately last week sat. But, I mean, looking at Arizona last week, they looked pretty dang good. And when you and I were having that discussion about Fields-Kyler he wasn't even injured at that point. I was speculating going, I think I'm going to make this flip-flop. We talked about that last week. And then, Kyler ended up sitting, and then Fields put up yet another monster performance. Great. But as I was saying back then, I was foreseeing something with Kyler. The attitude on the offseason, getting his bag, him and Cliff Kingsbury getting into it. I think it was Monday Night Football on live TV. Kyler telling Coach to, settle the fuck down. Weird stuff. And then the next week, him and D-Hop, who just came back from his suspension, Kyler and D-Hop are getting into it. I'm just like, okay, there's something going on here in Arizona.
And yeah, it could be an injury. We've seen this in baseball fantasy, you know, like if they want to rest a pitcher, they'll put him on the IL. And I think this is maybe Arizona's way of doing that with Kyler. I'm not saying that is what's happening. I'm just saying things are adding up. And I think I think that team's about to explode in a very, very bad way.
Yeah, and that gives me some 2018 vibes with Jalen Ramsey on the Jags, actually. Now, talking about that, that's why I don't really even want to go into Thursday Night Football that much. Aaron Rodgers kind of doing the same thing, yelling at his coach on the sideline, and it's just an ugly game with Dobbs out. Again,
it is.
You could roll Jones out there. Tannehill's coming back, but who fucking cares? Derrick Henry,
who cares?
He's a must-start all the
time.
Robert
Woods.
Right? So it's like, what do you even talk about in this game fantasy-wise? I mean, like, I hate that stuff we saw on the Field Yates posted on ESPN, and I love him, but, like, where do you rank Jonathan Taylor and McCaffrey? Who cares? You're going to start them every week. It's the same thing with, this. If people are staying away from Rodgers, right, they're going to start Aaron Jones every week. They're going to start Derrick Henry every week. And maybe Robert Tonyan is that guy that goes off in a DFS, whatever. What's more important to me right now is the Bills-Eagles Super Bowl hopes that we had. High-powered offense. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, even Singletary's been good this year. Gabriel Davis has been a monster. And on the Eagles, everyone's getting a piece of the cake. Hurts, Goedert, before he got hurt. Now we're seeing a decline here. Bills getting an illness in the locker room this week. Josh Allen having trouble with that possible UCL injury, so he's not 100%. And now with the Eagles taking their first loss, a demoralizing loss, and Goedert gone for the next couple weeks, what are you seeing mid-season in terms of fantasy production?
I think you hit the nail on the head. You're still going to start these guys as long as they're playing. You know what I mean? I still think if maybe the Eagles, for my own good use, maybe that gives Devonta Smith a couple more targets, though I've kind of soured on him the last couple weeks. I know we've talked about that at length. But I just think, maybe Miles Sanders gets a few more touches, A.J. Brown gets a couple more looks. Not going to be shocked. A guy that both of you and I have talked about that hasn't done anything yet, but again, similar to other people we've talked and called on the show, Kenneth Gainwell might see a couple more touches. They might go a little more run heavy. Maybe Jalen Hurts has a couple more rushing yards. The Eagles and the Bills have the luxury of being so good that little injuries, or not little injuries, but a Goedert goes down, there's still so many weapons on that team, I think nothing's affected. Same thing with Josh Allen, who, UCL sprain, that's kind of big, and I've even said that, you and I were going back and forth on this, how ESPN's like, he's good, he's optimistic, everything's fine, and then Thursday night, it's kind of like, ooh, he's not practicing. Friday, ooh, he missed another practice. Saturday, Josh Allen threw the ball a couple times. I'm like, and then they lose to the Jets.
Like we've always talked about, like A.J. Brown, you're going to start. You must start. Diggs, you must start him. But when it comes to like Devontae Smith, that might be flex 1 or flex 2. And that's really...
Yeah, like that downgrades a little bit, but they're still, both teams are so good.
And, all I have to say is, with all the things that have happened to my team and ESPN with injuries this season, this is the most appropriate moment of silence that I can give to those fallen players. Once again, this was Fantasy R&R with Rob and Ryan. We'll see you next time.
Godspeed.